The general outline of this session, concert, lecture, I don't know, is I'm going to be presenting 3 works, George Aperghis' Recitation 8, then his Recitation 9, and then J. Eckardt's Dithyramb. And with each piece, I will show all or part of the score, depending. I'll walk through kind of how to read the score, especially for Aperghis' works. And then I'll talk a little bit about my approach to learning the pieces and getting them in my throat. And then I'll sing the pieces. If any of you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to them whenever I can. If I miss anything or there's a question you have that I didn't cover in the presentation, I'm also happy to answer your questions at the end of this session. All right, and present. There he is, George Aperghis, still alive and well in France. He's actually born in Greece, but has lived in France since his early childhood. His father was actually also an artist as well, and he grew up with love for avant-garde since a small child. So a lot of his work plays around with the music theater genre and the singer or actor's means of communicating. He wrote a large opus called 14 Recitations for solo female voice in the years 1977 to 78. This work is divided into 14 movements, and it breaks down traditions of music and theater through atonality, extended vocal techniques such as operatic singing, speaking, sputters, and screams. And he also uses puzzles in his scores. The text of the piece is derived from the French language, but the meaning of the translation is often nonsensical, as it groups random words together and even breaks down words into random syllables. There are exceptions to this, particularly movements 2, 9, and 11, in which translation plays a huge role in the interpretation. There's a section of the recitations, movements 8 through 12, that is a series of triangle scores. These are the most puzzle-related movements, and the performer is free to really lean into the comical or perhaps analytical aspects of the movements. So here is movement 8. So the top line is sort of instructions and examples, and then below that, the triangles, that's the musical score. This is an early example and actually a quite conservative example of graphic notation. Now, graphic notation, which developed in the 1950s, is the representation of music through the use of visual symbols outside the realm of traditional music notation. Graphic notation can look like this. This is from a piece by George Crumb. It could look like this, or it could even look like this. Now, going back to Recitation 8, I want to initially point out that there's only a treble clef on the last line of each triangle. If you look down at the very bottom, that sort of squiggle thing, for those who are not sheet music readers. For those of us who do read music, it might be helpful to imagine treble clefs on each line as a means to orient yourself and to kind of figure out how to read this. So I didn't put them all over the page, but that's a section that has that. Now, there are a few ways that you can perform this movement. You could read it left to right, which kind of sounds like this. Mai, bi, somai, tavi, etc. You can read each triangle vertically, which if you read top to bottom sounds like this. Mai, somai, si somai, ale si somai, etc. You could also read the triangles from the bottom to the top, or if you're feeling really adventurous, you can kind of mix it up and do something like this if you really wanted to. Now, since the text is nonsensical, it really is all about fun and color exploration, creating timbres and textures with the sound of the voice and the sound of making consonants. And really tasting those consonants and indulging in the use of your tongue, lips, and teeth. Now, from a practice perspective, what's challenging about this score is how rapid the note changes are and keeping one's vocal endurance through the whole movement. So I want to give a few tips that revolve around vocal and body stabilization. In singing rapid moving music, I like to think of my instrument and body sort of as a buoy. I rely on my personal vocal technique to keep my instrument healthy and reliable, but I also try to be flexible to the natural tendencies of my voice. I think of classical vocal technique not so much as to achieve a particular operatic result, but as a means to manage, troubleshoot, and work naturally with my body and voice. In singing fast music, it's good to be stable, but not rigid to a particular set of rules. It's also good to be flexible, but not too relaxed and mindless from techniques which can actually guide your vocal mechanism. Now to the nitty-gritty. As boring as it is, practicing this movement slowly is key. Practicing slowly gives us time to get better at playing music, and it also allows us to analyze physical relationships between adjacent notes and to build healthy and reliable transitions between notes, tailored to the way that one uses their own unique voice. Isolating small sections can be great to stabilize when eventually singing larger phrases and eventually a whole piece. So let's take two examples, transitioning between singing and speaking and transitioning rapidly from low to high notes. Changing from speaking to singing can be very dramatic and surprising to both audience and singer. I just love the thought of there being sometimes when words aren't enough and so we sing, or when music isn't enough or singing isn't enough, we dance. On the other hand, changing from singing to speaking can be just as intentional and just as dramatic. Take the very end of Puccini's opera La Bohème. Puccini's writing is, it's basically music the entire time. The whole opera is nonstop and everyone's just singing all the time. And so there's a spoken section that comes suddenly near the end of the final act of the opera, and the drama just couldn't happen any other way. The dramatic intention of switching between speaking and singing can definitely influence how you execute music like this. But for the time being, I'm just going to address this from a technical perspective. So when you're speaking sort of in a performance, it's different than speaking, in real life in a way. If you've gone to see a play, for example, you might find that the actors are speaking up here. It's not like they're yelling, they're just very, very confident in what they have to say. And what's going on is that they're supporting their voice a little more with their breath, and they sort of elevate their voice, and they really tap into their resonance chambers. So in transitioning between speaking and singing, it's really great to lock into this kind of thing in order to steady your transition. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Let's look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th and 8th line of the first triangle. Atignalesi somai, varu, atignalesi somai. So that's mostly spoken except for varu. So what I like to do is use the preceding words sans mai to prepare for varu. What I do to prepare is not only do I support my voice a little more than I already am, and I also prepare the space in my mouth as if I'm singing those words. Because when you're singing, you need to have space in your mouth, lift your soft palate, be bright, all that good singer stuff. So I'm going to show you two scenarios, one without preparation and one with preparation. Atignalesi somai. va, and it's like, it's fine. It's fine. But the vocal quality is pretty different between those two things. And if you want that to be the case, it's fine. But from a endurance standpoint, it's a little risky, at least in my opinion. So if you prepare sans mai with the singing space as if you're singing varu, it just smooths out that transition. Atinalesi, sans mai, varu, mai, varu, varu. And your instrument is just kind of like ready to go, and you can, the breath has space to maneuver itself more quickly. Let me give a more exaggerated example. We're gonna look at the second triangle, and you might have noticed already that high E in the 8th line and so forth on the word no. First of all, with a lot of Aperghis' music, not only do singers perform this, but actors perform this as well. And not that singers aren't actors or actors aren't singers, but some actors who perform this aren't trained singers. And so the pitch accuracy is not really the specific intention. Some actors might sing that more as just like a gesture, like il détache de vie, no, il détache de vie, toi no, and it's about the gesture and about the contour. Even for trained singers, like if you don't have a high E, like it's fine. You know, I feel like you can just like drop that note down to what's most comfortable for you, because you're gonna have to sing it 12 times here. For me, I actually sing a C, which is still high, but I mean, I'm a coloratura. I just felt that I have 12 high C's in me. I don't have 12 high E's. Maybe with prayer, but so anyway, I want to draw your attention to this example because the preceding words before this high note are spoken, whether it's vi no or tasoloto vi toi no, a toi no. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to show you two examples again. One without preparing the preceding spoken note, and one with preparing it. So, il détache de vie, toi no. It's like, it's okay, but it just feels like, it feels like a really fast leap. And even if the execution is successful, jolting your body like that kind of throws you off balance, and being kind of out of balance while you're continuing on the piece, that will it'll kill your endurance later on. So now here's with preparation. And on the toi, I'm gonna lean into my breast support, toi, toi, and I'm gonna have more space in my mouth as if I'm singing a high note, as if toi is like the high C. So here we go. Il détache de vie, toi no, toi no. And regardless of the quality of the high C, I don't feel like I'm making a long jump off a cliff to get there. I feel like my body's like emotionally prepared, but really physically prepared to make that leap. I use this concept a lot with dealing with rangy music. There's that lick that you heard earlier, varu, varu, and that's a almost an octave apart, which is not insane, but you know, it's a thing. And so what I like to do, especially when going from low to high, is I sing the preceding note with the space and the support as if it's a high note. So I'll show you kind of like unprepared and then prepared. And it just, even though it's like, okay, you know, it's not great, and I feel like the space, I could have more space for the high note, but it's hard to get that without preparation first. So now with preparation, I could even go, and it's just way easier to handle the vowel change, to handle the range, just because everything's kind of there, ready to go, if that makes sense. Hold on one second. Great, so that's all I'm going to cover for recitation 8, and now I'm just going to sing this for you. So if you give me just one moment, I'm going to switch over to the other device, BRB. So here is recitation 8. Mai, so mai, si so mai, alle si so mai, nyale si so mai, dinale si so mai, atinale si so mai, vare, atinale si so mai, havare, atinale si so mai, cha havare, atinale si so mai, pop cha havare, atinale si so mai, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, shate, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, le shate, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, le shate, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, ni le shate, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai, ni le shate, corn pot cha havare, atinale si so mai. Vi, tavi, lotavi, solotavi, asolotavi, det hasolotavi, il det hasolotavi, na, il det hasolotavi, toi na, il det hasolotavi, a toi na, il det hasolotavi, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, tage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, setage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, sacetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, trosetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, or trosetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, la or trosetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, fene la or trosetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, sofa se fene la or trosetage, yana toi na, il det hasolotavi, asa, si tu veux, si tu veux, si tu veux, si tu veux, oh, si tu veux, oh, si tu veux, et moi, si tu veux, c'est moi, si tu veux, disais moi, si tu veux, la disais moi, si tu veux, quand elle disait moi, si tu veux, c'est 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 quand elle disait moi, si tu veux. All right, that was recitation 8. I'm gonna go back to my laptop. Hold on. All right, I'm back. I have to say this is very surreal giving this sort of presentation via Zoom. So let me see. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. And now we're gonna look at recitation 9. Oops, recitation 9, there. And it's another triangle score. In this case, it's really meant to be read horizontally. You could start from the top or the bottom, depending on what kind of texture contour you'd want to create, whether you want to start off minimal and then get busy, or start off busy and then get minimal. Now, what's unique about this particular triangle score? Well, it's written with a tempo marking, which is at the top left of the page, quarter note to 60 beats per minute. And there are measure lines, which are circled in orange, and rhythms that suggest a time signature of 2/4. And there are lots of rests or moments of silence that I've circled, at least some of them in blue. And so all of these specific markings create a score that's to be performed slowly, with silences playing a huge role in the drama, which doesn't happen too often throughout this whole set of recitations. Just check chat. Is there any significance in the use of triangles? I'm not sure if it's like in comparison to like, why didn't you write in squares? Why didn't you write in circles? I think triangles were, at least in my opinion, how I perceive the score. I don't want to speak for the composer, but it's a very easy way to like build gradually and just like add one word at a time or one phrase at a time. A lot of these triangles are building, whether they make sense or not, building sentences. And so I think triangles kind of achieve that in the best way. Be hard to kind of build slowly with a circle, I guess, unless it's like start here and then here and then here. Anyway, that's sort of my answer to that. In addition to the slowness of this score, what also makes this score very unique is that the text is actually a cohesive and translatable sentence, which is super exciting. The sentence is gradually built from the last word to the first word if you read the score from top to bottom. And the sentence is completed at the last stanza, the last line of music. So the complete sentence is: Parfois, je résiste à mon envie vers son sujet. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi donc ce désir? Which roughly is, sometimes I resist my urge, without you, I. Sometimes I give in to her. Why then this desire? Now, with scores like this that have a lot of room for interpretation, it could be a little overwhelming to decide on where to begin in interpreting the score and really making it your own. So the first thing I do is I look at the text. Because of the nature of the score and the sentence being repeated and built upon, there are words and phrases that are repeated several times. So I like to look at the entire sentence and then look at individual words, and I think of how those words make me feel. Let's look at the word that is said the most, désir, desire, which I've noted in pink. The desire spoken of, a constant temptation. How does the human condition of temptation make me feel? Sometimes temptation makes me feel angry, confused, sexy, mischievous. Sometimes I feel a lot of these feelings at once. So in performing, leaning into a particular feeling as you recite désir can color the word in a really beautiful or in a really terrifying way. Out of context of this score, a great exercise is to take a sentence, recite it several times with different emotions behind it, and record yourself, and then go back and actually listen to the recording. And the way your voice sounds as you apply these different intentions can often surprise you. And the meaning can often change dramatically. Take the phrase, I love you. Happily saying, I love you has a pretty obvious meaning, but saying, God damn it, I love you has a very different meaning. It could be a sense of betrayal, or maybe a sense of being helpless to a love that you don't necessarily want to feel. Now, with an entire pool of colors to recite words and phrases, it's time to organize. Now, as a performer, unless you have a specific goal to just induce chaos or create a wild atmosphere, I wouldn't recommend going back and forth a lot with just lots of consistent contrasting colors. Because if you're trying to bring a point home, just creating a textured atmosphere like that, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Your point's not going to get across. To really bring a point home, it's great to utilize suspense, and that can be created by mapping out a larger structure to your score. So, there. I've chosen to divide this into 3 sections based on the 3 clauses of the overall sentence. And I use these sections to create an overall arc for the piece. I divide the score into 3 sections, and then I choose 3 emotions, and I put one over each section. And then I perform the music with that emotion in mind. Here's an example. I start off the piece feeling curious. What is this desire? This is foreign to me. I'm trying to figure this out. And then as I continue through the score, I start to feel angry at myself, angry at temptation, at desire, angry at the world, I don't know. And then I begin to accept it, whether that's a satisfying acceptance or a sense of giving up. Those are 2 totally different things and both totally valid. Here's another example. I start off feeling fearful. I'm afraid of desire. I don't want to feel that. This is new and not good. And then I start to get surprised that it's starting to feel less bad. It's starting to feel okay. And that's something new about myself that I'm learning. And then I start to indulge a little bit in that feeling of desire, and it becomes mischievous or maybe devious. And then I end the piece kind of like that, which is sort of a very plot twisty kind of ending. So as I go from one section to another, I have the option to either have an upcoming emotion sort of bleed into my current emotion, sort of like blend them in, or I can be very direct and transition straight into another emotion with no warning whatsoever. And both approaches are valid and effective. Or honestly, if I mark my score, make a plan, map it out, and then I get on stage and I want to do something else entirely, that's totally fine. But this arc, I use these arcs often to help keep me on track in case I walk on stage and I, my mind blanks or I'm not feeling as spontaneous as I'd like. I like to use this kind of structure a lot in free improvisation, actually. When I kind of step into a free improvisation mode, I sort of have like different emotional pools or decisions in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm going to feel like this for a bit. So that involves these kind of noises. I'm going to feel this involves this kind of noise. And then maybe I'll go into this. I like having that structure because it's a great safety net for me to really just go off the rails and really be free in my improvisation. And then if I realize I'm like, okay, I need something to fall back on, that I can go back to my structure. And I don't have to be like afraid of like, why am I not making noise right now? So another concept I want to touch on with this movement is the breath articulations, which doesn't really happen too often, really, except in this particular movement. And I want to talk about how one can be creative with just the sound of a breath. There are 2 moments specifically I want to look at. The circled in pink is a slow exhale followed by an inhale. And circled afterwards in purple is these quick staccato exhales, kind of like blowing out a candle rhythmically. Like this. Now, I want to clarify that this concept is not an original thing of my own. This was taught to me by a mentor of mine last year, German contemporary soprano Sarah Maria Sun. And I just want to give credit where it's due. And if you're not familiar with her work, I highly recommend that you check her out on Spotify or on YouTube, or if you're in Germany, go. She's just a really incredible and intuitive artist, and just one of my favorite sopranos ever. Right. So you can also be creative in how you physically draw your breath. By adjusting the shape of your mouth, different vowels, lifting your soft palate, all those good singery things, and by adjusting the direction of your inhalation to different parts of your mouth or your throat or your chest. You can create a lot of different colors in the sound of a breath. And same goes for airflow. A consistent airflow or a manually inconsistent airflow can evoke some pretty scary effects. in singing, you have your basic 5 Italian vowels. A, E, I, O, U. A, sort of like neutral place for singing. It's a very comfortable singing vowel. And you create E and E just by moving your tongue. I. And you create O and U with just your lips. Wow. Right? So when you breathe in on different vowels, because the acoustics of your mouth change, the color of the breath changes. So without any sort of motion behind it, that's on an ah vowel versus, let's say I darken to an ah. The color of the breath has changed. Like the ah vowel, the air just sounds like a more hollow space. Same with E. And you can really play around with more precise vowels if you really wanted to. In terms of breath location, I guess the most non-musical explanation I can give is like whether you're kind of like, let's say you're feeling anxious and you're breathing kind of high versus if you're stable and secure, breathing kind of low. That's a very general example of where your breath is being taken. So in singing, singers are often encouraged to breathe, breathe low with support, but have the airflow kind of run along a high roof of your mouth, high soft palate. Ha, ha, ah. It's just good, healthy singing. But for dramatic purposes, you could breathe super low and almost like kind of like keep it very low, like in your throat almost, and it just evokes a different emotion. Let's say I'm feeling fearful or I'm feeling diabolical. I could, even like keep like really intense contact and just and that's very different from hi. Super different. And that's done with just breath, which is pretty incredible ability that I feel humans have. And airflow. So consistent airflow, the air is flowing at a general same speed, right? You could disrupt that airflow either with just stopping the air, like with your breath support, or you could stop it using guttural, I don't want to say guttural attacks, but kind of closing your throat, closing your cords a little bit. And by closing, I don't want to be like, ramming them together, like there shouldn't be grabbing with singing, but you can kind of create a guttural attack just like by touching, allowing the vocal cords to touch. Right? So you can do that with breath. And you can create like really cool articulations with breath. So if you're feeling super tense or like, tense, and then you want to release that tension, that's caused by catching the breath in a guttural attack and then releasing it. Let's check the chat for a second. Do inhalations fatigue your voice, especially with glottal attacks? If you do a lot of them, especially in a short period of time, that is, it's harmful. It's really not good to do it all the time. And it's also not good to be very forceful with glottal attacks. I would say even like in traditional music, there is a purpose for glottal attacks because it is in our vernacular, like in the English language. Even just now, the word we often have a small attack. I am. I mean, if I really wanted to be like an opera singer, I am, like, I mean, people don't talk that way. So I've, in my singing and in my improvisation, I've introduced some guttural attacks, but I'm always very mindful of like, okay, have I been doing this a lot? Like as soon as I'm beginning to feel tired of it, I back off. And so, yeah, that's sort of my take. I don't want to say that's sort of the rule. Other singers might have different opinions on that. So I would definitely ask other singers too how they feel about glottal tax. Even beyond glottal tax, even something as simple as, you know, changing the acoustic of your mouth, or even taking a breath through your nose as opposed to through your mouth, that has a different emotion behind it than right. So I find that through physically exploring how I take my breath, I'm able to further articulate an emotion that I might try to convey. And in a piece like Recitation 9, where there are a lot of moments of silence and soft dynamics, articulating the most delicate sounds can create a unique, intimate, and wonderfully strange performance. There's a lot more I could talk about with this movement, but I think for the sake of time, I'm going to jump into performing it.
Désir, désir. Désir. Ce désir. Ce désir. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Je lui cède. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Son sujet. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi? Ce désir. Mon envie vers son sujet. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi? désir. Ah, mon envie veut son sujet. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi? Donc, ce... Ah, désir. Parfois, je résiste à mon envie vers son sujet. Parfois, je lui cède. Pourquoi? Donc, ce... désir.
Now I'm going to share my screen once more. Yay, there's Jay. Now we're getting to one of my favorite pieces written by one of my favorite composers, Jason Eckardt. Jay is an incredible and incredibly accomplished composer based in New York, and I recommend that you check out his work and listen to his music as soon as possible. Dithyramb comes from his larger chamber work, Tongues, which is for soprano, flute, clarinet, guitar, viola, and percussion. And I actually want to read Jay's program note on the work because he's a brilliant writer and has just articulated this piece so well. The title of this work, Tongues, refers to glossolalia, better known as speaking in tongues, an ecstatic outburst of unintelligible vocal sounds that resembles spoken language. The vocal writing in tongues evokes the volatile grip of possession that is said to hold the human vessels through which the divine or supernatural passes. In 6 sections that vary in instrumentation and character, the soprano articulates sounds that suggest the transformation from self-awareness to rapture. These sounds, not limited to phonetic utterances, often reflect the timbral properties of the accompanying ensemble. The soprano oscillates between influencing and imitating her instrumental counterparts, alternately supporting, amplifying, and leading the ensemble. So, Dithyramb is the second to last movement of Tongues, and it is the only movement that is unaccompanied. So here is the first page of the work. So the language that we're looking at in this music is dictated in IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet. Composers, IPA is your best friend. We singers are trained to read this, and it just makes life a whole lot easier when we're unsure how to pronounce a word. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not saying that you replace a language in a score with IPA symbols just like all the time. English, Spanish, German, like whatever you're setting, just put the language in, we'll read it, it's fine. But if you're setting a text that either is glossolalia, or if you're setting a text that needs some pronunciation tips, I highly recommend that you use IPA in a separate guide that's preceding the score, which could be like a page that has like the text on one side and then like either IPA alongside it or like underneath each line, or you could have a guide that's like these vowels are pronounced like this, or these vowels are pronounced like this IPA symbol. But yeah, all in all, IPA is awesome. It's much more clear than if like someone's like, ooh, as in oh, like that, that doesn't make sense because in my mind, O is O and not U. So anyway, and then there are different symbols for like U versus U, you know. So yeah, IPA. So now, in contrast with the Aperghis we looked at earlier, this score is very pitch specific, very vocal, and very dynamic specific as well. But similar to Aperghis, in my opinion, it celebrates sonic contour. When approaching a piece of music like this, it could seem a bit overwhelming at first since there are a lot of markings. But I want to give a tip on absorbing music like this in a natural and not so stressful way. When preparing vocal music, or what if you're an instrumentalist, instrumental music, when you're preparing music with lots of challenges, I find that zooming out and zooming in helps me out a lot. Zooming out, I mean simplifying by dividing a piece of music into its components, pitches, rhythms, dynamics, language, if need be. And I practice individual components of a work. And then I zoom back in by layering components together and seeing how they fit. And soon enough, you're not only performing the piece, but you're performing a piece with a lot more intention, commitment, and overall spirit. It's a slow, methodical process, but it's extremely worthwhile. So as an example, let's take a look at dynamics. And we're going to zoom out and then zoom in. Normally I use paper scores because I'm old-fashioned and I like coloring. And I tend to color code my dynamics, and that tends to look like this. So extreme dynamics like forte and piano are filled in with a solid color, and medium dynamics like mezzo forte and mezzo piano are circled. Louder dynamics, mezzo forte and forte, are orange, and softer dynamics, mezzo piano and piano, are blue. I find it personally helpful to assign dynamics with colors, and for me particularly, I like the calmness of blue for quiet stuff, and I like orange. I originally thought when I started color coding that I would use red, which is my favorite color, but it's a bit of a panic color, and I didn't want to induce any stress in reading a score, so I chose orange. And for me, orange sort of invokes like fire, and so I think of loud dynamics with that sort of ferocity. So I find it personally helpful to assign dynamics with colors for this reason, and it just is easier for me to absorb as I'm reading music, because I'm reading pitches, I'm reading rhythms. It just helps me to kind of like use a different part of my brain to absorb dynamics. Now, even looking at this could still be a little scary because there's just a lot on the page. So what I've done next is simplified the markings to just loud and soft. And I've put those loud and soft sections by highlighting the text in order to be able to zoom out and kind of take a look at a very simplified contour. So take a look at this. This is just loud and soft. And then what I do, which is kind of silly, but very helpful for me, is I practice speaking and not singing, but speaking these very exaggerated, simplified volume changes. Kind of sounds like this. Gotta move this. Okay. Etc. Now, that's not the way I would perform this piece. It's a total mood if I did. But what it does is it just gets my body used to the very general contour of the piece. And once I kind of get used to that, then I zoom back in by adding a little more of the details. And those are the details put back in. Let's see. And what I find is that with the knowledge of the overall contour, this sort of loud and soft thing, and with knowledge of the overall arc piece, the smaller dynamic shifts have a context, and the execution of those dynamics are more informed and have more a more detailed intention behind them. You also have the opportunity to treat small dynamic shifts, for example, forte to mezzo forte, as color changes if you want. And let me show you an example of that. First line, last measure, the first beat. You have without any dynamics. Now the mezzo forte markings I kind of treat not necessarily as just like less loud, because that does less loud is not helpful to me. But I kind of treat it as like in loud but like inward. Maybe it's like a thought to myself, or maybe it's like just a softer texture or something. So without really thinking about being less loud, but sort of changing my emotional intention, I can create these little waves. And it's more delicate, but the dynamic changes are still there. Let's see. Now, as far as other layers of this piece go, rhythm, pitches, language, they take a lot of practice and slow, thoughtful practice. For example, for rhythms, I might just speak through it very slowly and with a metronome. So for example, from the beginning, see, this is the beat for now. Fa, ha, 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 sh, fa, ha, ma, e, gosh, etc. And this piece, it's like 5.5 minutes long, so there's a lot of work to do if you're gonna really go and like get the rhythms in your head. But again, trust me, with this kind of music, it's really worthwhile to do that. When I'm performing this piece, I'm not really counting as much because I've done this work from the very beginning when I first learned the piece and just got the rhythms into my body. Also, tempo flessibile, so yeah. And then as far as pitches, I also practice these at the beginning very intentionally, sort of outside of technique. I just kind of oscillate between different pitch relationships and just try to get those in my head. For example, let's take the first measure. I'm just going to oscillate between notes. I have perfect pitch, by the way. So if you're like, wow, how'd you get that F sharp quarter, whatever, like, yeah. So, fa, fa, I kind of allow myself to go back and forth and feel that relationship. And I do that throughout the piece. And again, once those get in my head, of course, sometimes the pitches are blurred because of vibrato and other color things that happen. And I know that I'm not 100% pitch accurate when I perform, but it really helps to do this background work to keep myself, connected to pitch, at least for in some percentage. So yeah, working these layers slowly and thoughtfully, and then layering them, it goes a long, long way, and it's vocally worthwhile and artistically fulfilling. Now there's so much more to dig into with this piece, and I'm sure there are more questions you probably have, but for now, I'm just gonna sing it. All right. Oh, and this is, if you're curious, this is my paper score. All the markings in the world. Lots of colors, lots of sections and stuff, lots of wild opinions. This is like, I've had this, God, I really need to print another one of these and remark it because this paper is just so old. There's like literally a coffee stain. It's so old. Anywho, just making sure my pages are in order, because that's like my worst nightmare with this piece. If I have pages in the wrong order, I wouldn't even like know what to do. I think I'd just like walk off stage.
All right, here is Jason Eckart's Dithyramb.
So that's all the stuff I prepared for this. Thank you all so much for attending this. This was super fun to put together, and I'm so happy to share this music with you and to share my thoughts about it. And I hope they're helpful in some way.